Hey, y'all, I'm Shane Sams. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast today. I am always excited about my guest, but man, I am pumped up and fired up today because my guest on the Shane Sams Show is Priscilla Shirer. Priscilla Shirer is a prolific writer who has literally written dozens of books and resources, Bible studies, and other awesome materials for parents, for women, for Christian people who want to go out and grow in their faith, grow in their family, and grow in their future. You know, over the last year, I've been speaking at a lot more events. My speaking career, per se, is actually just growing by leaps and bounds. And I recently spoke at an amazing event in Dallas, Texas called Life Surge. We had the stage in the middle, so you're completely surrounded by this huge crowd, 8,000 people in the stadium. Our musical guest was Maverick City. We had all these amazing speakers, and Priscilla was our main event. She was the headline speaker. And I spoke in the morning and she spoke in the afternoon. And I was at lunch. I was with some members of my team. We were sitting at a table and Priscilla and her husband came in and their kids came in. She had two of her sons with her. And we were the only ones in there. So she came over and we said, come on over, sit down. We sat down and we just had this amazing conversation about life and the Lord and marriage and raising kids, about writing books and speaking careers. And it was just an awesome conversation. And I knew I had to have Priscilla on the podcast so that I could share her wisdom, her journey, and all of her amazing skills and talents with you on the podcast today. And that's what we're going to do. Priscilla and I had a great conversation. We covered a lot of topics. We talked about how she got into her ministry and how her ministry turned into this amazing speaking career, which led to an amazing career writing books. But we're not just going to talk about the books that she's written and all of the things that she's done. We're going to talk about Priscilla Shirer's writing process. Like, how does she get the book out of her? How does she pick the topic? How does she figure out what goes in each chapters? How does she know what to include, what to exclude? And how does she go from idea to published work out into the marketplace? And we covered a whole lot of other topics. We talked about working with your spouse. You know, me and my wife, Jocelyn, we worked together. Priscilla and her husband worked together. We talked about raising up kids to be entrepreneurs. We talked about our teams and just all sorts of amazing topics. I don't even know where the whole conversation went, but I know that you are going to be inspired. You are going to be motivated, and you are going to love my conversation today with Priscilla Shirer. So wherever you're listening to the Shane Sams Show right now, maybe you're on the treadmill somewhere. Maybe you're going for a walk. Maybe you're getting ready for work or you're on your commute already. Whatever you're doing, grab yourself a cup of coffee or a mason jar of sweet tea. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Three, two, one. Hi, Priscilla.
Hey, Shane. How are you?
I am doing great. I've been looking forward to this all day because I had a lot of conversations in Dallas a couple weeks ago, but I had a great conversation with you and your husband, Jerry, about at lunch. And yes. I can't tell you how impressed I was with not only you, of course, and not only him, but your sons and your family was sitting there. And I am in a space in my life. I got an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. So I find myself looking for people that next season ahead of me. And
I do the same thing. I totally get that.
So if my kids end up as good as your kids at their age, I'm going to be doing something right.
Well, listen, just remember, you saw them out in public. So they're on the best behavior.
Yes. Right. They're always like, okay, if I embarrass mom, she's going to kill me at this point. Right. You know? Yeah. What was the biggest difference like going like teenage? This is the weirdest age, is 13. It's so awkward. Like, do they come out of that? Is there hope for me and Jocelyn at some point that we're going to have well-adjusted kids that will talk to us?
You know what? Just so you know, I call people that are about 10 years ahead of me and ask this exact same question. Is there hope? Do they come out of this?
You're looking at 28 right now.
That's right. But you know what? The other day, I got a random text out of nowhere from my 19-year-old who's a freshman in college. He sent a random text and said, Mom, I just wanted to say thanks for everything you've done for me. I love you.
Oh, get out of here.
I mean, man. I was like, oh, gosh, thank you. So
That's
now
amazing.
And then there are these little glimmers that God gives you that just kind of encourage you through the teenage journey.
Yeah, they're those God winks. I need a lot of encouragement, God. So send them down, baby. Come on now. I need a lot of encouragement right now. Let me go back a little bit before we talk about, like, I saw you on stage. It was incredibly powerful. I said before, before we got to meet, my wife, Jocelyn, she loves Armor of God. Like that's her favorite one of your Bible studies. Like it's one of the most impactful things she said she's ever done. And, but I kind of want to go back a little bit and just set the stage because, it's like an iceberg. When people see people on stage or they see people writing books, they don't realize the massive amount of ice that's under the surface. They just kind of see the tip of it. So take me back to when you first got married. How old were you guys when you first got married? You and Jerry?
I was 24 and Jerry was 30.
Okay. And then is that about the time you wrote your first book, right?
I did. I look back on that now and I go, what in the world was I talking about at 24 years old? What was I saying?
Right.
But I'm grateful the Lord gave me that opportunity. Writing was something, Shane, I just wouldn't have ever pursued. I still have trouble considering myself to be a writer. I wasn't ever one of those kids who loved reading or loved writing poetry or papers in school or anything like that. So,
yeah. So when you guys got married, like what was the plan? Right. Like, I mean, because you date before you get married and you weren't really like moving toward the book maybe, but what was the plan for you guys that you were going to do before you said, hey, I'm going to write this book?
Well, I was a broadcast journalism major in college. So my plan was to go into television. I wanted to do news, and that was the plan that I had for my life. My husband was the vice president of international operations at Hilton Hotels. So we met because early in my 20s, I was doing some speaking with the Zig Ziglar Corporation, and Hilton called to see if one of Zig's speakers, there were about 6 of us, and they asked, would one of them come and do a little luncheon they had for their executive team? And so I went, and that's how I got introduced to Jerry that day. Turns out at that point, we had been going to the same church for 7 years, but we had never met each other.
He was in the balcony and you were sitting downstairs or something, right? That's what was going on.
He was in the balcony, not trying to be on the front row of church. And I was up there sitting with Dad and my family. And so anyway, we met there. So my plan was to continue to do news. And his plan was to continue on as the vice president of operations at Hilton Hotels. And then God just sort of started through a series of events, just shifting everything in a different direction. And we both have just sort of continued to yield to that. And honestly, it has taken us on the greatest adventure that we could have ever imagined, not only for us, but for our 3 sons.
Tell me about that shift. Like we often call our moment of shift that took us from school teachers to entrepreneurs our catalyst, right? Like something happened. And sometimes God gently takes you on the shift and sometimes he like hits you in the face, right? Like what was your shift like there? Like what was that shift like? Man, I think I need to write this book. It's really on my heart. Like what happened there?
Well, it wasn't about a book at all to begin with.
Oh, okay.
At first, it was that I was just going to women's Bible study groups that were inviting me to come and to share God's word. And sometimes I'd show up, there'd be 10 women at it, and I would go. And sometimes I'd show up, there'd be 300 or 400 women there. And I was in my early 20s. And whether the group was 10 people or 300 people, I would just share a little Bible study, whatever God was laying on my heart. But I was still pursuing broadcast journalism, and how the Lord sort of let me know that he had a different plan for me was that every opportunity that I got in television ended up slipping right through my fingers. I'd get an opportunity. I'd be with a show for, like 1 season and it would be canceled. Everything was successful before I got there. And then I would be hired to participate. And then that show would go away or the opportunity would fade. So really the shift for me felt a lot like disappointment and discouragement. You can imagine being in your young 20s and feeling like your self-esteem is shot because you feel like I obviously am not good at this because I keep getting turned down or opportunities keep fading away. But the Lord allowed that almost like Elijah in 1 Kings 17, where that brook dries up. And it's that brook drying up for me in broadcast journalism that made me go, okay, God, what in the world are you doing? And give me enough courage to just stop trying to go my own way and just follow you. And so it sounds quick and easy when I say shift, but no, it was over the course of years of me surrendering and going, okay, I'm going to stop hanging on to plan B and go with what you clearly are showing me is the path that is for me.
I coached college football for a while. That's how I started out as a teacher, and I was coaching college football. And I had this really like kind of great assistant career, and I was serving people. And I decided I'm going to be a head coach. I'm going to be one of the youngest head coaches in Kentucky. And that's what I'm going to do. God, I'm just going to go be a head coach. And I started applying for jobs. And I literally came in second in like 35 jobs. You think I would have caught on by then that God did not want me to be a head coach, Priscilla. And so finally I got this job. It was in Jocelyn's hometown. And it was the literal worst program in Kentucky. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to be a head coach. I'm going to turn it around. I was 0-10 in my first year and got running clock 9 times. So like God was like, hey, buddy, I think you should be an assistant coach. So I went, that's what I did. I was like, okay, I'll listen now. I'll go be an assistant coach. I'll be a defensive coordinator.
Sounds like you and I are kind of the same kind of person that he's got to just kind of smack us across the head a couple of times.
Yeah, I don't listen. It's like Jocelyn. She's got to smack me around sometimes to pay attention. So, it's God's the same way. He's like, Shane, you're so stubborn. You think you learn by now. So you all did not have kids then when this shift was happening?
No, okay. We didn't have kids then. And full-time ministry was never a plan or a goal. Actually, that first book came about because I was speaking somewhere and somebody from Moody Publishers happened to be in that audience that day. So I got a call later saying, hey, that theme of that message you shared, we would love to write that down so more women in different places can read that. And I remember going, no, I'm not a writer. I don't have the desire to write, and I don't even think I can do it. But they encouraged me towards that end, and just kind of surrendering even to that. That's how everything has been over the past 20 years. It's like as the Lord has opened up a door that we feel the peace to move that direction, despite the fact that sometimes I feel not like I'm not capable to do it. Just saying yes. Well, in that case, opened up 20, 25 years now of publishing with Bible studies and books.
I always find this amazing because so many people that I meet just that are tremendously amazing and successful like you are, in like any space that they're going at, it all comes down to that yes, right? Because
it really does.
You have to put yourself in the right place to be in the right place at the right time. The only reason I'm up there on stage with you in Life Surge is because some random dude from Florida called me in the middle of a global pandemic and told me he was starting a live event company, and I thought he was scamming me at first. and then I flew down there and we talked, and I was like, okay, this seems real. And when we were saying yes, Joe and his partners left the room, and Jocelyn was sitting there going, are you sure? There's only like 3 people here. Is this a real company? Like, what's going on? And I was like, I just got a really good feeling about this. We should just say yes to this. And then I said, then Joe made me each of us told our story, all the partners of Life Surge. And I told my story, same story I tell on stage. And the whole audience and his people freaked out. And then Joe said, hey, have you ever done a big stage event? And I was like, no. And I was like, he goes, do you want to? And I'm like, sure. And
I'm so glad you said that yes, Jay, because what you shared and the way you are vulnerable and open with y'all's story and the way you tell it, oh my gosh, it is so remarkable. Oh,
everybody's got to go Life Surge to see Priscilla first. And then I'll be there too as like just a little bit of an appetizer. Okay.
I'm coming for you.
Right. So this was very much it wasn't, I want to be a writer. It was,
no,
I'm being pulled into ministry through writing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. And honestly, every other stream that ministry has sort of unraveled for us, whether it's the video driven Bible studies or whether it's the movies that ended up kind of opening, none of that was a pursuit. I didn't go looking for that. It was the Lord bringing another opportunity, and I could either say yes or no. He wasn't forcing me to do any of them, but I could either push past my fears and insecurity and just go ahead and say yes, and let's just see what the Lord will do with this, or I could let my fears talk me out of it. And I'm grateful for a husband, honestly, and some other incredible encouragers that I have in my life that are able to help me wade through those yeses and nos. And when they feel a confidence about, God's going to use this if you just will give him your yes, then I've been so grateful in hindsight for the times that I've just said yes, despite the fear, moved forward and watched God do what he was going to do.
So it wasn't, the fear I hear, I coach a lot of people in their online businesses. And if you go online, if you're an author, if you're an expert, if you're an entrepreneur, you're basically saying I'm an expert in something, right? Like that's kind of what we're doing when we walk out on the stage.
Which is very scary.
I know, right? Like, oh gosh, someone thinks I'm an expert.
We're not.
I got to have I know, we're all just figuring it out. People don't get that every day, right? So it was never, though, a fear of who am I to put this out there? It was basically just a question of, do I listen to God or not, right? I mean, that's kind of where it boils down to.
Yeah, mostly it is that. It is, do I listen to God or not? Do I trust that he's going to take care of the results, that all I have to bring is the best I can and surrender it to him, and then trust him with the outworkings of that and how that fleshes out to other people.
Yeah. When I was a coach, I always looked at my son and I was like, do I really want him to be a coach someday? Because a lot of coaches' sons follow their dad's footsteps. Mm-hmm. But when we see sons and, our next generation try to follow our footsteps into coaching, coaches know what it takes to be a coach. Like, we know how much work it takes, how much emotional damage that the industry does to you over time. And what did your dad think when he sees you like taking this pivot, taking this fork in the road toward ministry? Because he's been in ministry. I mean, he is, led his church, and like, so he kind of knew what you were getting into. Like, what did he think when you were getting into this? Maybe both from the pastor side of, okay, sweet, another warrior for the kingdom, or also the dad side, like, oh man, I know what's going to happen next with the bad start of this too,
Well, I think he probably was just as shocked as I was as to how this has all worked out in the past 25 years, because none of us could have predicted any of this. The writing, the speaking, the way this looks now is nothing like what I had in mind then. This is all my dad said to me, and I'll never forget it. It has actually informed most of the choices that I've made over the past 25 years. When I was graduating from college, and I had that degree in communications, I was trying to decide, do I go to Podunk, Nevada and accept some journalism job where you have to start at the bottom and work my way up? I was willing to do that. I had been on a Christian radio station as an intern throughout my undergrad years. And now, because of that little radio station, people were inviting me, like I mentioned, they were inviting me to come and speak at their women's things. So after I graduated, I didn't know which one I was supposed to pursue. Do I go to graduate school, or do I start pursuing television, radio? Now I love radio, but also I'm speaking every now and then, and I'm enjoying sharing God's word. And my dad looked at me and said, Priscilla, which one of those things would you do if you were not getting paid to do it? And I knew my answer without a doubt. I knew immediately that I wanted to go to seminary. I ended up going to Dallas Theological Seminary to study God's word further. And through those seminary years and then beyond, the Lord just clearly kept opening up door and opportunity for me to continue to share his word. The last 25 years has literally just been an invitation coming and me going, yes, I'm going to honor God and go there. And it's been 25 years of just saying yes.
So let's look at the writing and the speaking, because I think those are two interesting things, because a lot of times writers aren't speakers, right? And a lot of times speakers aren't writers. Let's be realistic, right? But writing kind of opens the door for speaking sometimes, Is that how you've kind of, like, do you prefer the writing process, or do you prefer the writing opened the door so I can go talk to 8,000 people in Dallas, Texas? Like, which one do you kind of dig it more, like the speaking or the writing?
I would say that the speaking actually comes a little bit more naturally to me. Yeah. In my case, the speaking is what opened up the door for writing.
Oh, that's right, because you were on the stage.
It was the opposite way. I was not writing at all. It was something that, again, one of those opportunities that came to me through that first book with Moody Publishing. But then several years later, I got a call from Lifeway about packaging some video-driven Bible studies, writing 6-week Bible studies and doing the videos to correspond with those. And it was one of those things, again, where I walked out of that meeting with them after they flew me and Jerry to Nashville to sit around a big boardroom table and have that discussion. I remember walking out of that room and getting in the elevator and looking at Jerry and saying, well, you can call them and tell them no, because isn't that what Beth Moore does? I can't do what Beth Moore does, So it just felt like it's out of my wheelhouse. It's out of my experience. It's not what I do. And I just need to stick with what I know well, at least comfortably, that I can do. And for me, that was teaching God's word. That's what I enjoyed. That's what I felt most comfortable with. So the writing has been sort of a extension of what began as just a teaching ministry.
I love, though, how it goes back to kind of what your dad said too, like, what would you do for free? Right. Totally. So you followed that path, and you lean into that talent, wisdom, experience that you felt like you were gifted with. And then that later opens the door for something like writing. Okay, so let me ask you, from a guy who has I've recorded over 1,000 podcasts of my own, and I've been on hundreds more. So I'm definitely a podcaster, right?
You are a podcaster.
I'm a podcaster. That's why I say at the beginning of my talk, I'm not a professional speaker. I'm a podcaster that got drug up on this stage to talk to y'all, right? That's what I say, right?
And we're so glad about it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. But so I'm a podcaster, and I've tried to write a couple books over the last 10 years of my journey, right? So I think I'm kind of in that space. It's like this is my wheelhouse. I feel comfortable in. I don't feel comfortable here, but a bunch of people are trying to make me come over here and do this. And maybe I'm not listening to the old big guy upstairs on this one, right? So like, how do you become a writer? Like, how do you translate that speaking? Because you're powerful when you speak, right? Every word out of your mouth moves the crowd. How do you become a writer through that? Like, what's your process, I guess, for that, to write a book when your wheelhouse is something else?
Well, to boil it down into the most simple terms, you become a writer by writing.
Go figure.
Okay. So literally, this is the thing. We as quote unquote writers, we oftentimes can spend so much time organizing our thoughts, thinking about our thoughts, titling the book, coming up with an outline, figuring out the way we would like it to flow, studying, researching. We're doing everything except writing, except actually just sitting down and putting words on the paper. And for me, I know there are some friends of mine who are like for real writers, they're official writers, and they can organize their thoughts. And I mean, they can get chapter by chapter, one written after the other. That is not me. I'm not an organized writer in that way. I write based on what that day I'm inspired about in a particular verse that I might be writing about, or a particular thought that hit me in the middle of the night. I'm going to sit down and write those 500 words. They're going to be messy. They're not going to be grammatically correct. They're not going to be amazingly massaged paragraphs. I'm just getting the content on the page, and I will file that away. I don't know where in the book it's going. I don't have to organize it or title it or make it look amazing. It's just on paper. I will do that fairly regularly till I have all these pieces that I filed away 6 months ago, 3 months ago, the discipline of just getting it all on paper. And then I look at all these bits and pieces. And a lot of times I will see that there is a common thread that is running through 8 to 10 of these, or a dozen of these random paragraphs that I wrote. The common thread is grace or faith or redemption or whatever the common thread is. And when I put those paragraphs together and then start massaging them, there's a whole chapter right there. Or there's two chapters, or the fodder for a whole section of a book. So a lot of times I find that my encouragement to would-be writers is write.
Yeah. So you don't choose the topic first, even? It sounds like it's almost like you're just living your life. You're intentionally setting aside time to write your thoughts, write your feelings, write your experiences, but you're kind of sort of organizing them in a pile, right? And then when you're ready to go say, okay, well, what book has emerged? Are you kind of pulling it out of that? So you don't really like say, well, I'm going to write The Armor of God. This is the book I'm going to write, and I'm going to start outlining.
Well,
it's kind of like almost... You know what I'm saying?
It's kind of both and. A lot of those writing pieces might become individual articles, or they might become something for our website, or something that I use for a magazine that needs me to send an article in. But when I'm writing on a book topic, then yes, I am more organized, because like The Armor of God, like you mentioned, your wife doing The Armor of God, or Elijah, I know going in what my topic is, but I'm not necessarily writing it in sequence. There might be something that's over here in Elijah's story that's what the Lord gave me a thought about last night, or that's what's my research unearthed something that I want to just write on that. I don't know exactly how that's going to fit in yet, what chapter it's in and all that, but it's part of the package. I know it's going to be in here, but I don't necessarily write it linearly, if that makes sense.
And see, I think that's I got a bunch of friends that do books and publishing, and I'm kind of an extroverted, like random person in general. And for some reason, but I'm also married to the most organized human being on the planet Earth. It's
We're
like
the same people. We have the same lives.
It has to be that way, right? That's what has to happen. And, but all my friends tend to also be these linear analyticals, right? And I think it's just because God is surrounding me with people to keep me from going off the rails. But I've always watched them write their books, and they're like, they've got their outline, and chapter 1's going to be this, chapter 3 is going to be this. Then they release it. And maybe I'm just like,
by those people.
I know it's unbelievable, but this process feels I mean, if you get to the same place, you get to the same place, right? So, I mean,
yeah,
as long
and
as
I think
just,
you have to use the process that works for you instead of trying to fit into the mold of what works for them. I have so many friends, man. They are writers. I have a friend named Liz Curtis Higgs. She might have a book contract for 5 or 6 books at a time. I would never, ever put myself in that situation, but she just knows where she's headed. And she trusts her weight as a writer to be able to imagine and create, whether it's fiction or whatever she's writing. Man, I'm a 1 book at a time person. And most of the time, I don't even tell my publisher that I have a book until I'm about halfway to 75% done with it.
That way, you're not going to get lost in the muck and mire of your own piles of paper, right?
That's right. And of course, publishers, they have to put a deadline on it because they have to market. They have to think about when it's going to release and all that. So, of course, they have to have timing. And I want to be able to write freely without the pressure of that time on me until I've got that cadence going where I know that I know where I'm going with this. I know where I'm headed, and I know I'm going to be able to.
You can actually make the deadline that everybody agrees to.
That's right.
Let me ask you.
Said, can I just slip in this little comment? Because I just mentioned publishers, and for any would-be writers that happen to be listening to this, I just want to say that we're living in an age now where self-publishing allows you that freedom to be able to go at your own cadence, and is such a high quality way to be able to produce a book, where 20 or 30 years ago, you almost had to have a publisher to do it. You don't anymore. None of those restrictions need to confine you. You can publish your own book. And honestly, with the way social media is now, you can almost do better in terms of the reach of your material than if you had a big publishing house behind you.
Yeah, my buddy, he got a book deal. It was so funny you say that, because he got a book deal, but he had no control once the book was done whatsoever. Yeah. And then the publisher promoted it pretty heavily at first. I mean, he actually made it all the way into airports and things like that. And then it just completely pulled back, and it was almost not even on the shelves. So there was this asset just sitting there, and they just negotiated to get his book back so that he can use it in his business, like as a lead magnet or as a gift for customers or as things like that, so that he can go out and actually use the material instead of it just sitting on a project shelf in some editor's office somewhere.
Absolutely.
So you work with your husband. Your husband and you work together, and I'm always fascinated by people who do work with their spouse in a way, right? They work all.
It is fascinating, isn't it, Change?
It is. I feel like I'm just in a glass and God's watching an experiment about 90% of the time, But Jocelyn always says to people, they'll ask her, "What's it like working with your spouse?" And she'll say, "Well, most of the time, Shane and I bring out the best in each other, but occasionally the worst." Right?
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, right. So tell me about building a business and a ministry and a family with your spouse. What does that look like for you guys? How do you work together? How do you separate the two?
Yeah. Well, I guess, the genius of God in putting us together like you and Jocelyn is that Jerry and I are opposites. So he is a very detailed, very organized businessman. He's a businessman. I, on the other hand, am kind of spontaneous and creative and all over the place. And I am not a businesswoman. All that calculated, detailed stuff, that business contracts, all that requires meetings. I'm not interested in any of that.
Every word you just said hurts my soul. So we might delete that part. It hurt me so bad. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it's not my natural wiring, I should say that. Can I do it? Yeah. Yes. But the fact that Jerry and I are like puzzle pieces, it's like we just kind of fit in the sense that he really has the acumen and the ability to handle all of that business side of what we do. And I literally have just been able to focus on the ministry output and the reach to people. And it's given me an opportunity as well, because if I was doing both of those things, I would not have had the margin to raise our kids. That has been my priority, to have margin to prioritize my husband, prioritize our home life, and prioritize our children. And so I've been able to do that because of the differences that Jerry and I have, and that kind of makes us fit. Now, do we sometimes get into each other's space and start doing stuff that's on the other person's list and get on each other's nerves? Absolutely. But overall, it's been the way we've been able to balance things with that. The business side is his stuff, and then the ministry side in terms of the output of writing and teaching, that's what I kind of focus on.
You said something, you said a real golden nugget there that I hope everybody heard. When we try to do what's on each other's lists, that is where we find conflict in our business, right? It's like, this is my space. But the problem is, it's weird. In a business, there's always a little overlap. Like there's something you got to both talk about. Like there's money or a contract, or are we going to agree to this? It's not just, I want to do this. Like that's where we find the friction is. But here's the problem is when you come, okay, so there's no coming home from work. We're at work right now and we are at our house and we go somewhere else, right? So it's like work and home, there's so much the blending of it all. When there's an issue then in the house, like a kid does something and there's a disagreement on parenting, or like, where is the line, right? Like setting those lines on the list blur so much. And that's, I find the conflict comes when the expectations are, this is my thing. And then I go try to take Jocelyn's thing. And then there's a problem, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, to just kind of echo what you just said about that blur, the reality is that I think we have to also relax into the blur, meaning it is going to blur. It is going to overlap. You're at home with your kids, you're working, it's ministry. There's a business element to that. There's going to be some blurring of those lines. And instead of trying to make them so rigid, because it will frustrate you, because that's not life, that's not real life, just relaxing into the fact that there's going to be some meshing and merging and blur there, and giving each other a little bit of grace and margin and honesty when you feel a little bit infringed upon. I think that's just, you know, growing with a marriage. You know, here we are, Jerry and I are headed into our 23rd year. In July will be 23 years. And we're still having to have some of these conversations about how we're negotiating raising the kids and doing ministry and all that stuff. And, you know, it's been a couple decades.
It doesn't go away. It does not go away. Yeah. When's your all's anniversary? July what?
July 24th.
Ours is the 3rd. I got married the day before the 4th of July, so I'd never forget it.
You cannot forget.
I can't forget. I'm not just a hat rack, Priscilla. Not just a hat rack, right? What about the kids? Like, what about the kids? Like, what do they, you know, we talked a little bit about this at lunch that day, like opportunities and things. And I always encourage people to go into entrepreneurship, even if it's just a side hustle and they love their job, because it just opens so many doors for your children that they would never get to see, right? Like, what about them? How do they view you guys and what you guys do? And have they figured out that you're out there really at the, you know, the vanguard of the kingdom work, or like, do they even kind of get it yet?
I figure that one day all of our kids will be in therapy, telling them about all the things.
Maybe they already are. I don't know. Should be. I don't know.
So I tell them right now, listen, I'm apologizing in advance for whatever you're going to tell your therapist. I'm sorry right now. Just get over it and let's move on, because I've done my best.
That's your next book title, Advanced Apologies to Your Children. There you go.
Well, with our sons, you know, I wanted them to be fully engaged and invested in what we were doing, so they felt like we as a family were doing it. And also, to your point, I wanted them to get a taste of entrepreneurship, that working can look like ministry, but it can also look like business that you have developed, that you have put your time and effort and energy in to build your own entity. They saw that with their grandfather. They saw that now with their dad, particularly in the African-American community. It is very rare for there to be a Black father who has not only built his business, but has done so in a way that allows him to cultivate intentional daily time with his sons. My husband is always with my boys throughout the day. They have access to him. I'm so grateful they have seen that entrepreneurial paradigm that now they'll be able to take with them. So we homeschooled our boys for a lot of years, about 5 years, where they could travel with us so that they could get a taste of that sort of freedom. They saw us work hard. They saw me writing. They saw the ministry. They saw the exhaustion from some of that. They sat in some of the business meetings their dad had, not only as he helped to build our ministry, but the other business endeavors that he's had. He's built a business here in Dallas outside of our ministry. They've had a firsthand look at all of that. And we've been incredibly intentional about making sure they have a seat at that table and see the work that goes into that happening and doesn't think it just fell out of the sky. It's part of the reason, Shane, why I had them at Life Surge. You know, they're teenagers. So did they want to be there all day? No, they were like, Mom, we don't have to sit through every session, do we? And I was like, nobody, you don't have to sit through every session, you know, play a few video games back there in the green room. But like at lunchtime, I was like, boys, you're coming out of this room. You're sitting at this table because Shane Sam is at this table. And one of the Benham brothers is at this table who they've known for years. You've got people around here. And I want you to hear this conversation. I want you to ask a couple of questions. Before they left that day, they had to ask 2 questions of 2 people. I said, I don't care who you ask, whether it's Auntie Ann or one of the Benham brothers or Shane Sam, but you're going to sit in this environment and absorb, even if it's just a relationship that you make with someone who you don't even know, a decade later might come back around to you as something God uses to open up doors for you. So we've just been intentional, to answer your original question, about putting them in the room with us, wherever we are, and then just saying, okay, Lord, open up their heart and eyes to absorb things that they don't even know are going to inform their future.
That's incredible. It goes back to putting yourself in the right place to be in the right place at the right time, like from the speaking. One of the things that we always focus on are uncommon skills and unfair advantages. That's one of the things we talk about with our kids. Like, how can we give them uncommon skills so that when they decide what they want to do, they might have those skills? And what are the unfair advantages that we've worked hard to build into our life that we can give to them so that they can, propel? And this is a crazy.
Wait a minute. Say that again. I got to write that down. What did you say?
So one of the things we're really intentional with is uncommon skills and unfair advantages, right?
Okay, I love it.
Like, uncommon skills are things like, for example, my son loves computers and he loves YouTubing and all those things, but he doesn't understand that not everybody's going to be a famous YouTuber. What he needs to understand is you better know how to code so that you can create the YouTube. So that's an uncommon skill, right, that we could focus on with him. That's in his wheelhouse of things that he likes. And an unfair advantage can be anything that you like. Our accent, when we first started talking on stages and on podcasts, I thought everybody's going to judge me because I was from Kentucky, right? But instead, we decided to embrace it. And you can see behind me right here, I got "Hey y'all" written behind me, and I start every podcast with "Hey y'all." We're going to tell you where we're from the beginning. That's an unfair advantage. But an unfair advantage for our kids is like, I'm out here working hard. I'm out here doing these things, and I can give them experiences that I didn't get to have. That's an unfair advantage. So one of the unfair advantages for our kids is they've flown hundreds of times since we started this. And I can walk in with my 10-year-old or my 11-year-old, and I can say, Anna, take us to the plane. And she can go to the board. She can check in. She can look at the gates. And I don't even know my parents can go through an airport. I'm not even sure. So like those uncommon skills related to what they love and those unfair advantages that we've built because we've earned them.
That right there is a chapter in your first book.
There you go.
That right there is gold.
Shane Sam's first book is going to be Uncommon Skills and Unfair Advantages. Shane Sam's.
But that's masterful. That would be amazing.
I'm read that. I'm transcribing this when we get out of here.
Totally.
All right. I got one more question for you real quick. The business of being, what do you call it? A youpreneur, which is like, I'm the one that's out there. I'm the one that's on the cover of the podcast art. I'm the one that puts my name on the things, right? And I'm the one that's on stage, right? That you get all the attention, but you can't be on that stage alone. Like, you just can't do things, right? Like, you can't just show up and everything work perfectly. So like, what does your all's team look like outside of you two? Like, do you have like a big team, a small and mighty team? Like, how do you guys kind of operate from the team side of things? This is a question I get from every guest I get. People are like, what does their team look like? What does their team look like? Right. So like, I always ask it kind of last, like, what's your support look like, your team?
Yeah. Well, we do have a small and mighty team. And I love that you said small and mighty. That's awesome, because small does not mean in any way deficient. Just means that you've got the right people with the right skill set that are able to handle the right workload. And so we've been really specific about that. So Katie, Shannon, and a gentleman named Chris, they're the 3 people. And sometimes there's been 2 people that have worked with us. And we've kept it small intentionally because, as you know, managing people is a whole full-time job.
It is. And I'm not sure that people like your husband and my wife or me and you are any of us capable of doing a lot of people management. So, that's a different skill set,
Yes. But I also know that there are some things that are important to me that would not get accomplished if I were trying to do it all by myself. So I have grown in terms of delegation. I'm very good at offloading things off of my plate and trusting the capabilities of the people that work with us, our co-workers, that we're all working together. And I'm going to trust you with this project, whether it's an event that they're helping us to organize, because we host a an event once or twice a year here in Dallas where 3,500 women from Dallas, Fort Worth or surrounding areas just come for free for an evening. And we just all spend time together. Well, our team of the three of us organized that whole big thing. And so I have to trust them with that, right down to the smallest nuances of correspondence. I'll tell you this, when I was a teenager, I wrote Elizabeth Elliot's ministry. Do you know who Elizabeth Elliot is?
I do not. I do not know who that is.
Jocelyn will know who Elizabeth Elliot is. She'll know. She's passed away now, but she's just a legend missionary. And oh my gosh, her books are ridiculous. Okay. And I wrote her ministry. I don't remember what I was writing about when I was a teenager. All I remember is someone from her ministry hand wrote a letter back to me. The value that placed on me, the way I felt heard and seen is something I've wanted to reproduce through our ministry. So when a letter comes in from a young person who's read the Prince Warrior series and they've drawn me a picture of it, of some character, and they've written and asked me questions, we respond to those as best we possibly can. So whether it's planning events or just responding to people to make them feel seen and heard, I know I can't shoulder that myself. So we have a small team, yes, but with high skill and capacity to be able to help us to carry all those details. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome. I think that the more we trust people, that's what I resisted in the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I don't know why, but like when you let go and trust those people and understand they're not going to do it like you do it.
Right.
That's right. They're going to do it the way they do it, but the mission will still be accomplished.
Right.
That's where we got to turn the corner.
I think that's harder for people that are perfectionists. Admittedly, probably, I'm assuming this about you, Shane, because we've described ourselves so similarly, but I'm not a perfectionist.
No.
So I've got a lot of margin in there. There are things that are priorities to me and important about the way things are done. But in general, I'm okay if it's just done, but it's done in an excellent way, even if it's a different way than I would do it. So
we actually have a sign hanging in our office that says, "It ain't got to be perfect." That's why I got a sign hanging out here that says
nothing will ever get done if it's got to be perfect.
That's exactly right. It's just got to be done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we're on the same wavelength here, Priscilla. Well, listen, this was awesome. I mean, I'm so glad that we got to connect to that. I'm so glad we were in the lunchroom at the same time and got to talk. And I'm so glad you came on here to the podcast. I can't wait to share this with everybody that listens to our shows. Tell everybody if they want to learn more about you, if they want to check out your resources, what's the best place for them to go to connect with you and what you guys are doing on the internet?
Yep. Well, Priscilla Shirer is sort of my handle, wherever on Instagram or whatever. But our ministry is Going Beyond Ministries. So if you go to goingbeyond.com, you can just see all of our events where we'll be, or Bible studies and books and resources for your teenagers or your daughters, and just any way that we can come alongside and be an encouragement. That's our goal. And I got to tell you, Shane, I am so grateful, number one, that you would have me on your podcast, but also I feel incredibly grateful for the time that you took to talk to us over lunch, you specifically turned and addressed my sons to ask them and dig in a little bit and ask them a couple questions. I cannot tell you, as a mom hoping her boys are absorbing a few things, I can't tell you how unbelievably grateful I am to you, not only from what you shared on the stage, which blew us all away and has marked me in a way you may never know, but more personally, the time you took to just spend time with my children and my husband. I'm incredibly grateful to you, and I can't wait to do it again.
Awesome. We will be able to see each other very soon and have more of those conversations as we go out and co-labor on the stage for Christ. Thank you, Priscilla, for being on the Shane Sam Show today.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. That wraps up my conversation with Priscilla Shirer. Make sure you follow Priscilla on Instagram, Facebook, wherever you've got social media. She's out there. And don't forget to go to goingbeyond.com, where you can see her amazing ministry. You can get all of her amazing resources, videos, and trainings and books. She's got an awesome blog on there. She's got other stuff that she's doing. Make sure you check that out at goingbeyond.com. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by flippedlifestyle.com. Flipped Lifestyle is my brand where I teach people how to start, build, and grow online businesses of their own. At Flipped Lifestyle, we believe that everybody has God-given skills, talents, and abilities. Things you love, things you've learned, things that you have lived through, knowledge and wisdom that you can turn into an online business that can serve other people, An online business that can solve other people's problems. An online business that can make you an incredible income, change your life, change your family's future, and help you build an inheritance for your children's children. We've helped thousands of people start, build, and grow online businesses, and we would love to help you too. If you'd like to get started, we have a bunch of free resources that you can take advantage of right now to get your journey on the road. All you have to do is go to flippedlifestyle.com/free. That's FLIPPED lifestyle.com/free. And you can learn more about how you can start your online journey today. And don't forget to subscribe over at the Flipped Lifestyle Podcast as well. On the Shane Sam Show, I interview experts, authors, and entrepreneurs. On the Flipped Lifestyle Podcast, I interview real people from the Flipped Lifestyle membership, and we talk about their success, and I help them take their next steps live on air. And hey, if you love this podcast, if you love the Shane Sam Show, man, that's a tongue twister. Shane Sam's Show. There's too many S's in my name, man. People leave my name, they leave S's out. They call me Sam, they call me Shane. Sometimes they call me Show. But if you love the Shane Sam Show, if you enjoy our guests every week, and if you love listening to the podcast, help us spread the word. Do us a favor. Here's how you can do it. Make sure you're subscribed to the show. Make sure you're downloaded episodes every single week. Hey, go leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Give this thing a share on social media, or why not just go and tell a friend? We appreciate all the support. I read every one of those reviews, and they give me the inspiration and motivation to keep this show going and keep bringing amazing guests and amazing value to you. All right, y'all, that is all the time I have for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, in whatever it is you do in your business and life, be consistent, be prolific, be relentless. Make an impact. Pick your stone up off the ground, cast it out upon the waters, and cause many ripples. We'll see you then.